Warning, this podcast does not introduce any new information outside the Foundation's curriculum. Listener discretion is advised.
Hey there, friends and curious minds tuning in. Welcome to another episode of Real Doctors, Real Friends, the podcast that takes you on a behind-the-scenes tour of the world of medicine, one episode at a time. I'm Sana Samadi, your friendly second-year med student, trying to juggle classes, late-night study sessions, shadowing, and occasionally getting a full night's sleep. Whether you're just starting your pre-med journey or already knee-deep in med school chaos, or just simply fascinated by the mysteries of healthcare, you've landed in the right place. We're thrilled to be the first official podcast affiliated with the Faculty of Medicine and Dentistry here in Canada at the University of Alberta in Edmonton, Alberta. Our goal is simple, to create a space where we can explore the most pertinent topics in healthcare. Whether you're a current medical student, a hopeful pre-med, or just someone curious about the field, this podcast is for you. And let's be honest, staying up to date with healthcare news is more than just cramming for MMIs or prepping for exams. It's about understanding the ever-evolving landscape of medicine and how it affects our future as physicians, or even our current role as students. Plus, for all you pre-meds out there, this could be a great way to prepare for those big interviews by diving into real-world topics that matter. So sit back, relax, and let's make this educational journey a bit more fun and a lot less intimidating. We've got an amazing show lined up for you today, focusing on rural healthcare and the unique opportunities at the Grand Prairie campus. But before we dive into all that, Dr. Abraham, how's it going? What's new in your world?
Absolutely, Sana. It's a unique blend of student perspectives and expert insights, making it a dynamic and engaging resource for anyone interested in the field. Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Roshan Abraham, a family physician here in Edmonton, Alberta. I've been the co-coordinator for the Foundations block at the University of Alberta for a couple of years in the MD program, and I love helping students navigate their medical journey. This podcast isn't just about textbooks and exams. It's about understanding the bigger picture of healthcare. From policy to patient care, we're here to discuss it all with a dash of humor to keep things light. And I'll pass it along to my co-host, Shereen.
Hey everyone, I'm Shereen Hamza, an integrative physiologist and assistant teaching professor in the Department of Physiology in the Faculty of Medicine and Dentistry here at the University of Alberta in Edmonton. This week has been all about preparing for this episode and engaging with students, which is always a highlight for me. We've been diving deep into reproductive physiology, a topic that never fails to spark lively discussions. But today we're shifting gears to something equally important, the essential role of rural healthcare and the unique experiences offered at the Grand Prairie campus. Dr. Rolfson, thank you so much for joining us, which we value so much given your busy schedule. We're excited to hear about your thoughts and experiences.
What a privilege to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me to come. I've been hearing about this for at least 2 years, maybe longer, and it's been a shining jewel in our program, this podcast, and so now I get to be part of it. So awesome. Wonderful.
Yeah, Dr. Rolfson, it's great to have you here with us. Let's start with your journey. What drew you to medicine? How did you end up the Associate Dean of Medicine at the University of Alberta? It's always super inspiring to hear about the diverse paths that lead us to such roles.
Thanks for asking. I actually should say that I'm right now seconded into a different role. So even though I am the Associate Dean for the MD program, Dr. Lana Bistritz is acting in my role for about a 6-month period while I take on this regional academic lead role in an acting way. That'll go until November. So it's been quite a journey for me to be the associate program, or rather the associate dean for the last 4 years. How did it all start? I wanted to maybe go back a little bit and tell you about my own personal experience. I actually took some time to think about this question and went right back to when I was about 12 years old. Wow. And I was in scouting. And anyone who's been in like Boy Scouting, Girl Scouting, you have to participate in service. Mm-hmm. So what I chose to do was to get involved in visits to a nursing home. Okay. And this is me, my 12-year-old, 13-year-old self. And I can still vividly remember my visits with one particular man And we would sit and he would tell me stories for hours, multiple times over about a year. And I really enjoyed it. And it surprised me that I found that out about myself. And it actually inspired me to pay more attention to people in situations like that, older adults who are living with chronic health conditions. I then discovered that within my own family, I had grandparents and even a great-grandmother who lived to the age of 99 here in Edmonton. Wow. So there I was discovering this about myself, also learning that I enjoyed biology. And before long, I said, you know what, a career in medicine might work out for me. And so when I applied to medicine, I actually made it part of my application in my personal story or my personal letter. I actually talked about older adults. I don't think I knew what frailty was, but that ended up becoming my interest. And then from there, I went on to get my degree, went into MD, internal medicine, and so on. So for me, I had this interest in the people who are living with frailty, people who are more vulnerable, and I had a particular interest in finding out what could I do to advocate for them. So this concept of advocacy came early on. And I don't think I realized it until later, but I had a very similar way of thinking about learners, not only because they were often the most vulnerable people in the room, but also because they were the people that I could influence to make some changes and advocate for the best needs of older adults in the future. So that's sort of my quick journey.
So that's actually an incredible journey. It's always fascinating to hear about the unique experiences that shape our leaders in medicine. The Grand Prairie campus is a key part of the U of A's medical program. For those of you not from Alberta or who are yet to hear the news, the Grand Prairie facility was announced just recently in 2024. The government of Alberta announced funds for a partnership between the University of Alberta here in the heart of Edmonton and Northwestern Polytechnic in Grand Prairie, Alberta, to establish a new medical training center. Grand Prairie is a city in northwest Alberta with a population of about 63,000, and it says 166. That's pretty specific.
And counting.
And counting. Can you tell us what makes this campus so special and why it's an ideal place for students interested in rural medicine?
Maybe in a future podcast, you can speak to some of the physicians that are from there, and they'll give you the real goods on that. I've been able to listen to their stories, and just the same way that I had a story to tell just now, each of them will have their own story. I think, for example, about Yolanda Westra, who's internal medicine, and she's told me several times that she went there thinking that she'd be there just for 6 months to a year. And then she discovered how much she loved it there. And people talk about being infected with the culture. No one is attracted there thinking that they're going to stay, and then they arrive and they discover how much they love it. It does appear to attract people who have a special interest in adventure. Also people who are more independent-minded and love to solve problems on their own. So there is that independence that comes with the personality of the North, that willingness to go the distance, that willingness to go the extra mile to help out your neighbor. And so there are some values in the North which are unique to the North, special, and when people from cities go there, those that belong, it resonates with them and they really want to stay. So there is something about the place that is independent of the practice of medicine. And it's interesting because I believe that's often what influences people to stay, is their sense of community, how much they feel they belong. Separate from that, there is something particularly special about the practice of rural medicine. And you'll find that everywhere. But I don't think you'll find it quite as well anywhere as you do in northern Alberta. There's one thing to be regional, another to be rural, and something entirely different to be remote. And remote practice is where you are truly on your own. And you have to be innovative, you have to be courageous, and you have to be connected. You're very dependent on the relationships you have, not just with other colleagues, but with the community as a whole. And those relationships are critical. So people that are successful there often discover how important those relationships are.
That's so true.
Rural healthcare is a critical component of our healthcare system, yet it often doesn't get the attention it deserves. So the Grand Prairie campus plays a crucial role in addressing this gap. Dr. Rolfson, why is there such a strong focus on rural healthcare at the Grand Prairie campus? So what makes rural practice distinct, I think building on what you've just shared, and why is it essential for medical students to experience this aspect of healthcare, even if they may not see that they would fit into this in the long term?
Thanks for that question, Shereen. To answer that, I'm going to take us back just a little bit and tell you a little bit about my story and a little bit about what I've seen happen, and then that'll place the context for answering. The first thing is that I have been based in the city of Edmonton, but reaching out and doing clinical practice in the north for some time. It's been probably 30 years since I first started in Grand Prairie and Fort McMurray, providing monthly clinics, sometimes flying, sometimes driving. I did that for several years until I took on a role as the program director in internal medicine, and that made it more difficult to travel. But then I converted it over to telehealth, and I was doing telehealth-based clinics for a long time. So I continued that. And then after that, when I stepped down as the program director 10 years later, I had to keep going. So I went back to Grand Prairie and I started up new clinics in Westlock and Athabasca. And I still do that to this day, monthly clinics in those communities.
Yeah.
And that has been helpful for me. The other thing I've observed as a background is that in the same way, there have been some real leaders here in Edmonton who have forged relationships and pioneered new approaches in rural Alberta from a medical education perspective for some time. For example, Dr. Jill Conklin comes to mind, but there are many others who have done the same. And because of their work, we do have relationships as a University of Alberta with many of the communities. In fact, we have a very strong longitudinal integrated clerkship already developed there. We call it the Integrated Community Clerkship, or ICC. And they're based in several communities. This past year, we've had, I believe it's 23 medical students involved, which is about as high as we get.
Yeah.
So there's a real strong interest in participation. More recently, we've had some other programs like preclinical network medical education, which is actually what happens in 2 courses at the beginning of second year, those being gastroenterology and repro. And in those courses, you actually leave Edmonton, you live in a community, and you take the whole course in that community. So you can be gone from between 6 and 12 weeks, depending on whether you're going to participate in one or both of those courses.
So like an immersion experience.
It's immersion, yeah. And what's nice is then you can be available to do some observation, shadowing, and other community integrated activities during the daytime. And then you can actually participate in your medical school learning when it works best for you. And then the other one, just to mention here, is in Grand Prairie. Although it's a small group, they've actually already had a 4th-year experience in Grand Prairie running for several years. So that's the background. Now getting to your question.
Yeah.
We don't come to this distributed campus from nowhere. We come at this from all that I just described. Just like myself, there's many others who have developed clinical relationships. And as you can see, we have these medical education relationships as our base. We're ready now to expand, but we'll talk in a minute about this. But once we do expand, we're going to be able to do things that we could never accomplish. I think that we've taken things as far as we can with our existing programming, and we're ready for the next step. We know, for example, that the PNME and the ICC programs do influence students to choose rural practice, generalism, and they discover things they could never understand. But what we also know is that many of the people that apply from rural settings, they get romanced away from rural when they come to the city. They discover things in the city, and they look around and they see all these city folks doing their own thing and thinking in other ways, and they get romanced away from the intentions they had originally to return to rural settings. So we want to highlight what is wonderful and great about the North. We want to see people recruited there, stay there, and practice there.
I think what I like about what you just shared is it seems like a generation of physicians has been working in this field, in rural medicine, making an impact, forming a network with each other, which then sets the stage for these next steps and for future generations of physicians to carry on that that responsibility as well.
Yeah, it's gratifying, and I didn't see it until recently when I realized just how many people have been a part of this growth. And I should also mention, since we haven't said it yet, that the province of Alberta is supporting growth in both the south and the north.
Okay.
So Calgary is also expanding southward in the same way that we have a partnership with Northwestern Polytechnic, the old Grand Prairie College in Grand Prairie. They will have a partnership with the University of Lethbridge, and likewise will expand in southern Alberta.
Excellent.
It's clear that rural healthcare presents unique challenges and opportunities. And for someone who pursued family medicine and was actually thinking about doing rural medicine, I appreciate those challenges and opportunities. I think many people don't realize just how different the experience can be compared to urban settings. So what are some of the biggest hurdles you've seen in rural healthcare? For instance, are there specific issues like resource limitations or the availability of specialists that stand out more prominently?
I think misinformation is a big hurdle. I was just referring to that. People don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
Because once you find the right person and get the right fit, they discover that what we might perceive to be a hurdle is actually an opportunity. Right. It's actually the thing that makes rural practice so special.
I like that.
Right? I mean, here we sort of say, well, we'd be isolated. Oh, I wouldn't have colleagues. But in fact, from away, you might say, oh, that's just scaffolding.
Yeah.
That's preventing you from fully realizing the full scope of practice that you could have if you were working in that other setting. And so I think that's sometimes a misperception, but at the same time, we need to respect that there's different people who have different expectations, strengths, and weaknesses. But I can tell you that there is a huge number of our medical students who have not had this opportunity and now will take this opportunity to fully realize their potential in a northern setting that they could never realize in an Edmonton or city-based city.
Totally. Yeah.
I just wanted to say one other thing, and that is I have had personal experience with this. And I didn't have as much personal experience last year as I have now.
Yeah.
Starting, as I said, in about May, I was seconded into this role. So I've been on the road.
Yeah.
And I've been doing this a little bit for the last 2 years, but now I've been to many settings and not just Grand Prairie.
Yeah.
So yes, I've been to Peace River, I think 3 times now. I took a northern trip. We went way north, right through Manning up to High Level, Lacrete, and Fort Vermilion. I have several other loops planned, and I actually enjoy hiking. That's one of my favorite pastimes. And so I call these loops, right?
Yeah.
So these are just these loops, and I just think of them like a hike, but it's a way to go explore and discover something you've never seen before and really listen and pay attention. So as I've done so, I have been truly inspired to discover the culture, the physician culture that exists in some of these places. It's very different from one community to the next.
It is.
But I do highlight Peace River and High Level as 2 places where I see physicians that have each other's backs. They care for each other. They look out for each other. And when personal crises come along, they're there for each other.
Yeah.
They step up. And so there's a esprit de corps in many of these places that you don't experience in a city.
No.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't know that unless you've taken these loops.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I think as a medical student, it can really kind of surprise you what you end up learning about yourself just in your medical journey. I grew up in Calgary, and I've also lived in Vancouver and Edmonton, so bigger cities. And I recently just went to a conference in Medicine Hat, and it was just absolutely beautiful. The culture there is so different. Even though it's just a little bit south of Calgary, you wouldn't realize how different it is. And that's why programs like you talked about, Dr. Rolfson, like PMNE, where we have these second-year medical students going into these rural communities, is so valuable. I've had friends in upper years. One went to Athabasca. He didn't even know what or where Athabasca was, to be honest. And he came back from that and he absolutely loved it and had the opportunity to do so many things and advanced procedures for a medical student.
Yes.
So just an absolutely great learning opportunity from a medical school stance. So it's great to see this Grand Prairie province. I didn't have that when applying personally, even though I'm just in my second year now. And it's kind of great to see that development from the government of Alberta prioritizing rural healthcare.
I mean, if I could add to that, when you're in the city, if you're doing a rotation in internal medicine, pediatrics, surgery, you're quite distant from that staff member, aren't you? When I say staff member, I'm talking about the practicing physician who ultimately supervises everything that happens. Why? Because there's multiple layers in between. You're the junior resident. There may be, you're the junior medical student. There then may be a junior resident and a senior resident and what we call a subspecialty fellow. And during your time, you may not actually have much face time with that staff. On the other hand, you can go to some of these places and find at least as equally well qualified staff physicians, and they take you right under their wing. They take you into their lives, into their homes. You do things on weekends with them. It's like a true mentorship, apprenticeship type experience, and you're working with the very best that Alberta has to offer.
Yeah, for sure. I find that it can really, from my conversations, can surprise you how much you learn about yourself, even though you might be a city person before. You find out that actually appeals to you. So it's maybe not true that just rural people end up being rural physicians. But yeah, it's really enlightening to hear about these challenges and how it's preparing these students. And that kind of leads into the next question here. Can you share some specific initiatives at the campus that have been particularly impactful? And just any success stories or innovative approaches that particularly stand out?
Well, I should be clear that the campus doesn't exist yet. It's in my mind, but it's coming, and I can see it forming. And it's not just one campus. When I say campus, we talk about this Grand Prairie campus. I want you to see what I see. What I see is a place in Grand Prairie where medical students from the Grand Prairie Peace Country area may gather. I'm imagining a future where there will be something similar happening in Fort McMurray, by the way. Even though that's not an official announcement, I imagine it. Working with Keanu College, you could imagine a future where students in that area actually have all 4 years of medical school, residency, and into practice. And they don't have to come way into the the far west to do that. And then can you just come with me and imagine all these other communities, and all those other communities are networked with these regional centers, rural centers, and then these other remote areas. And they're also part of that campus.
Right.
So that to me is the campus we're talking about. And it hasn't been realized yet. But what I can say is the vision is forming quickly. And that's because there's been so much thought about this for so long. I've already talked about the programs that exist, ICC, PNME, the Grand Prairie Partnership, and other things, electives as well. But what I look forward to is the outreach that's going to happen. I think about medical students that are now training in those places. Can imagine with me that you have a medical student who is in their second year in Grand Prairie, but they actually went to high school in Grand Prairie or Beaver Lodge or Spirit River or Peace River. And they know people, they know families, and they have younger siblings that are still maybe in high school or in junior high. And so imagine those kinds of students now going on a road trip. Imagine them sort of sponsoring the Asclepius summer camp that's just got started this summer. Imagine them doing like a road show where they're actually traveling to all these communities and specifically reaching out to kids that are trying to figure out what they want to do. And they go, I know you. I could be just like you, and I could follow in your footsteps. That's the future innovative thing that I can see.
Cool.
And I can also imagine just the whole experience for the medical students in the future, where we're going to have the ability for students to participate in lectures and have an equal and equivalent and equitable experience compared to the ones in Edmonton. This means that we have to fully digitalize our settings in both Grand Prairie and Edmonton and other places. So it means upgrades, it means some money and investments. But once that happens, then lectures can happen in both directions. Not just Edmonton teaching Grand Prairie, but Grand Prairie teaching Edmonton, and that whole network teaching one another. So that'll happen in small group settings. And of course, they'll be able to do many other things on their own. Physical exam, anatomy lab, wet lab, all these other things will be more experiential and local with the local flavor that you can't get in Edmonton. The connections with community that don't exist here but do exist there.
Yeah. It's definitely important seeing, just as a young person, people like yourself in medicine kind of proving to you that you can do it. I remember I had a program in my own high school experience where there were people talking to us from non-physician backgrounds. They didn't have any family members, no links, no nothing. And hearing that as someone who's in the same boat, it was really inspiring. So it's really cool to see these kind of rural initiatives and how they can potentially influence other future rural candidates who are younger.
Yeah, there's definitely something to be said about being present and visible to the community, and especially to very young, impressionable people coming up. So those initiatives sound incredible, and I'm sure they're going to have a very strong impact, strong positive impact. And it's wonderful to see how education and community engagement can create real change. But I think an important thing you mentioned was investment. So this requires investment, and it requires the confidence and the faith of these multiple communities to really see this come to fruition. So very exciting things. So I guess taking it a little bit further, how will the presence of the Grand Prairie campus influence the local community and healthcare providers as well? So thinking about this, are there any notable partnerships or collaborations that you would like to highlight or you think would be particularly successful?
Thank you. It's again worthwhile taking a moment to think about our urbanist minds. We often think about marginalized or vulnerable communities, and we frame rural communities sometimes in that way.
Yeah.
We use our social accountability lens, as we should, and say, well, what do we have to offer to them?
Yeah.
How can we serve them? And a phrase I've once heard that I really held on to is that we should focus not on what is wrong, but what is strong. What is it that's strong in each place? Instead of coming in with the solution, go and listen. Pay attention to what they have to offer. And it's not just coming from physicians. There's a model that we use in medicine called the Pentagram Plus model. It's a partnership model where we talk not only about the academic community that run our medical school, but there's at least 4 other groups. One of them is community. Yeah. And I would actually subdivide that to include many communities, but especially the Indigenous communities that exist all over Alberta and other places. And then we need to think about the policymakers. We need to think about the health administration, Alberta Health Services, and other entities that are not always public necessarily. And, of course, the health professionals themselves that include our colleagues in medicine. So those are the people that we pay attention to. And so what we try really hard to do is to engage all of them and see what they have to offer. Right now, those collaborations are developing. I was so interested when I was in Peace River to be welcomed by the mayor. The mayor was right there along with many other councillors, and they were just thrilled to see us there. And they said that they've been talking about this for 20 years. There was a gentleman in the room who was retired, and they all turned to him and they said, "This is something that you've been working on for your whole career." And he said, "Yes, it is." So sometimes we think that we've just figured this out, but there are people there that have envisioned this for a very long time. Another example in Manning, I was welcomed there by the town councillor there, and my goodness, what a gentleman. He took us around. He showed us all his favorite spots. We had an ice cream together. We saw where they played ball.
What flavor?
Oh, I had chocolate, but there was many other better options.
Right?
So if you go through Manning, definitely stop and get ice cream there. But it was what I find is the community owns these things.
Right.
And the physicians are not always their own spokespeople. When we go to a place, they say, "Oh, you don't need to talk to us. Talk to this person."
Yeah.
There's a person like that, for example, Angie up in High Level, and she makes things happen. And she's figured out how to connect the physicians up with Alberta Health Services in such a way that they have advocated for the development of a new teaching center, one that will be maybe not quite as big, but comparable in size to the newly announced Masqua Clinic in Grand Prairie.
Okay.
Yeah, so this sounds like quite a dream come true for plenty of people, and I love that kind of phrase you use, Dr. Rolfson. Don't focus on what's wrong, but what's strong. Maybe it's my youth TikTok brain loving catchy phrases, but that really sticks. And I feel like that's very important in generally the field of medicine. A lot of times we look at rural healthcare and we read the news and we hear about shortages and rural settings and everything that's going wrong, but there's a lot that's going right. And this is definitely a step towards the right direction. So I love that you're kind of stressing that. And not to belabor this point, but I am a medical student and I have medical student admissions just top of mind always. I'm sure a lot of people relate. It's a very stressful experience. So for those pre-med listeners or just anyone interested in rural healthcare, I would love to hear more about this new initiative and how it can potentially impact them, and kind of looking at it from a student perspective. How does studying at the Grand Prairie campus shape their medical experience, and what unique insights can they gain from training somewhere like that in a rural setting, what that they might not get in an urban setting like Edmonton here?
Well, for anyone listening to this podcast who are in the North, they should be aware that on October 23rd, 24th, and 25th, we'll be having an open house.
Okay.
And so they'll have an opportunity there to come and see the Health Education Center. They'll be able to see the spaces. And I haven't really emphasized this yet, but Northwestern Polytechnic is amazing. They have actually... the land that they owned was actually leased out to build the new hospital that's in Grand Prairie. And so it's built such that the Health Education Center is continuous with it at all levels. And all of their spaces are designed with the AHS design in mind. So they actually have this space. It's very ready to be used and enjoyable. Now, I've completely forgotten your question. Oh, right. What was it about?
It was really 5 questions in one, to be fair. But yeah, what kind of unique insights can students particularly?
Right. Thank you. Yeah. So on October 23rd, 24th, 25th, we'll be having sort of a retreat or a visioning experience so that all those pentagram partners that I just spoke about, they will help us define the answer to your question.
Okay.
So it's still coming. But I can tell you as a program, there's at least 2 things that come to mind. In our strategic planning, we have decided to focus on generalism. So we want our students to come out of medical school understanding what it's like to be a generalist, what's awesome about practicing family medicine and other generalist careers, such as internal medicine, pediatrics, surgery, psychiatry, obstetrics, and gynecology. And we think that they can come out of that experience of medical school in Grand Prairie and be at least as well prepared, if not better prepared, than the students who are in Edmonton.
Yeah.
The reason I have a hunch that that's true is because we see the performance by our ICC students to be equivalent or better than the rest of our students. And now that I've actually had some time to get to know what people have to offer in the North, I think students will really understand generalism in a different way. Partly because of that relationship building that I was talking about before, and the closer mentorship and apprenticeship that can happen there. So I think that's what will be special. I also think that there will be a way to reach out to communities that we can't be a part of here in Edmonton, not in the same way. When I was in the North recently in June, I had an opportunity to have lunch in La Crete, which is a Mennonite community, and really get a feeling for that place. I also was just amazed to drive alongside the Peace River as it is in that northern area, and it's twice as wide as it is in Peace River itself. And just to look at the beauty of the landscape, and then to look at and think about the many Indigenous communities that are along that Peace River, especially going east, but many going west as well. And also there's a Métis settlement, Paddle Prairie, which is in that direction. And started to imagine for myself students, many of them Indigenous or from First Nations or Métis communities, actually training in those places, actually spending time with doctors in those places, or perhaps in a more hub and spoke model from high level, being able to do outreach to those communities and having an experience that we just can't have currently in Edmonton.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we, in our first year, learn a lot about healthcare in Indigenous communities and rural healthcare, but it's such a different experience just sitting in a classroom, learning about all these things. Even hearing from people from there is impactful, but it's a whole different experience just being there, and the amount you learn. Like you said, the students that come from those experiences perform better. So kind of going back to this idea, you kind of said, this isn't quite a campus yet, but it's kind of a campus in your mind. So for this kind of campus, what are your big dreams for it? And are there any expected projects that our listeners should keep their eye out for? We love kind of getting a sneak peek into what's coming next.
Well, I'm probably too transparent for these things. I'm happy to share what I know. Yes. One of the things I mentioned before is a partnership that's already been developed there with a group called Masqua. And if you go on the website, their website, you can read all about it. Mm-hmm. They're building a primary care teaching center, which is right across the alley, right across the driveway, I guess, from the hospital and the health education center itself. Mm-hmm. So that will be an amazing opportunity. I think they're going to have about 30 new rooms with the capacity to have multiple physicians working there in a teaching center. Mm-hmm. So that's something to look out for. It'll probably not open until the end of 2025, maybe early 2026, but nonetheless, that will be exciting because it will mean that students can be working with doctors who have dedicated time. Mm-hmm. And this is similar to a model that we have working very well here in Edmonton at the McEwen Clinic and other places where physicians are actually paid to teach. Roshan knows all about this, right? But many doctors are just envious to have that kind of an opportunity to be paid to teach, to have protected time to teach. And that'll really help out our medical students. That's just one thing. I don't know. I've seen the spaces that they have in the health education center, and I'm sorry to say that some of the spaces they have are already much superior to what we have here.
Wow.
I suspect.
Yeah.
Well, it's very exciting to hear about these future plans and potential for growth. I can't even separate rural from urban healthcare anymore. I would say that there are gaps in quality and availability of healthcare everywhere. We can't make a separation. So as we start to wrap up, what do you see as the future of healthcare in Alberta? And I really liked the vision that you shared earlier that we really can't have this strict separation between rural and urban. It's really more of a network and a partnership. So what do you see in the future for healthcare in Alberta? And more importantly, how can the medical community and the community at large help to play an active role in supporting and advocating for better healthcare in Canada in general?
6 words.
Okay.
Recruit local, train local, retain local.
Wonderful.
That's the future. And currently it's not like that. And I'll give you an extreme example, and I don't think many Albertans would know this, but the physicians that provide care in Lacrete and Fort Vermilion, reaching out to many of the Indigenous communities that are in northern Alberta that I was referring to earlier that are around the Mighty Peace, they live in South Africa. Mm-hmm. Still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know.
The majority of them fly out to Canada, and they work really, really hard and provide good care. Yeah. They're well-trained physicians and provide good care for a 6-week stint, and then they go home. Yeah. And then they come back again. And most of them spend less than half of their time living in Canada. Yeah. They are not connected with the communities in the north. And as grateful as I am for what they do and what they have done for decades, that is not our future. Mm-hmm. We need people that are local providing that care, who come from those communities and understand those communities. I maybe this is a time to just share a kind of a funny anecdote, but I mentioned before that my specialty is geriatrics and that I have been working in the north off and on, but not living there, just being a consultant and showing up and doing the best I can. So in my outreach visits in June, we actually did sort of have a change in plans because we had a bit of extra time, and off we went. And we drove to Lacrete and Fort Vermilion. Now, right now, there's no medical students going there. Right. And so off we go. And as I mentioned, had lunch in Lacrete and went off to Fort Vermilion and just showed up without an appointment and asked if I could talk to some of the doctors there. And they were very welcoming. They said, come on into our office and have a seat. Hello, who are you? Well, actually, that's not what actually happened. What actually happened is I walked in and the receptionist said something to the effect of, hello, Dr. Rolfson. Oh. And I can tell you, I thought I was on the edge of the world. That how could this person possibly know who I am? Yeah. Oh, please have a seat. They'll come. So I sat down. I was visiting with someone from Fox Lake and her father, learning a little bit about the fire that they had had the year before and how they had to work through that and some of the challenges of traveling across a river, which is actually an ice bridge in the winter and a ferry in the summer, but it's impassable in the spring and the fall sometimes, right? So this was quite a story. And then, they're ready for me. Off I go. I'm sitting down with the other 2 that came with me. And as I'm starting to extol the virtues of our future medical school and explore their interest, I noticed that everyone in the room had a funny look on their face. And they were all looking over my left shoulder.
So what was it? What was everybody looking at?
Well, kind of funny. So I just had to know. So I looked for myself, and it was a picture of myself. And I thought, what is that? How is this possible? No wonder they know who I am.
Okay, question. An official picture?
It actually
what
was.
kind of picture are we talking about?
Yeah, it's too bad.
From behind.
It could have been really juicy, but it wasn't. It was just my professor profile from the University of Alberta. And then I asked them, and sure enough, it was there because they knew me not as the associate dean for the medical school, but as a specialist in geriatric medicine.
Okay.
And so they were accustomed to saying, okay, what do I do when I encounter this particular problem? Then they'd make the referral, and I would be able to see them through telehealth or in Grand Prairie or something like that.
Right.
Okay.
So that was a bit of a surprise. And I didn't expect anyone to know who I was up there, and sure enough, they did. And it just makes this point that we sometimes have relationships that we don't know about.
Right.
And if someone like me in Edmonton could be known to someone all the way up there in Fort Vermilion and even have a reputation, then how much better would it be if there was someone up there who actually lived and worked there and could actually have the direct relationships with their patients, have a hub and spoke kind of relationship with a place like High Level, and make such a difference. And that answers your question about the future of healthcare. I just imagine the future where people are much, much more integrated. And now I'm not saying that if you're from a rural setting, you have to work in a rural setting.
Yeah.
Nor am I saying that urban kids can't become those rural practice physicians.
Yeah.
But what I am saying is we need to have an integrated future that's socially accountable and not dependent on other people to fly in and do for us what we should be doing for ourselves.
Yeah. And that there's a possibility that you can do a little bit of both, maybe?
I believe that's true. And in fact, that's going to be needed. In some places that are more remote, they're not going to have specialists. So they'll still be dependent on people to come and help. But it'll hopefully be more integrated.
Right. Yeah. So some hard-hitting questions for you. You mentioned that you commute a lot.
Yes.
So if you're driving, what's your preference? Do you drive in solitude, or is it a music party? And if you do prefer music, what would be your go-to road trip tunes?
Oh my goodness. Thank you for asking. I prefer driving to flying.
Okay.
I prefer podcasts to music.
Yeah.
This one?
This is now going to be my new favorite, but until now, it has been the History of English podcast. I think I'm on episode 150 or something like that. And before that, it was like the Great Courses series and other. I'd like to learn about history and philosophy and language and stuff like that. And I find that very inspiring. And often when I'm driving, it's either sunrise or sunset, and I'm surrounded by beautiful Alberta fields, and and it's just me.
Yeah.
And I get to be alone with my thoughts, which I don't get to do very often. And just to illustrate that, when I do fly, which I also do, I often just have a little nap. Tune out, close my eyes. I can almost predictably fall asleep during takeoff every single time.
Okay, that's a really great talent. I can never sleep.
Yeah, I don't know if I can do that.
Yeah. But I'm glad to hear that you're not just staring blankly at the seat in front of you. It's comforting.
That's not true. I can do that now since I'm incredibly sleep deprived with 2 children under the age of 4. But prior to that, no, I couldn't actually do that.
So how about you, Roshan? You drive in silence?
Oh, no. I have to listen to music almost entirely, and it's whatever music I happen to have on at the time.
Okay.
It has to be music. Yeah. I'd say if I'm listening to a podcast and I'm really into it, I can probably get away with that, but I much prefer listening and singing, right? While I drive, because that's maybe at this point in my life, some of the only time I can actually do that.
So if you pull up at a red light and somebody pulls up next to you, do you turn down the volume and stop singing, or do you just belt it out?
Oh, no. I still sing.
Do you want to give us a preview?
No, absolutely not. Come on. My throat.
I think I'm on the same page. In my car, it's like a concert every day, even if it's like a short commute. So depending on the mood, the genre will change, but there's always something happening. It's not silence. How about you, Sana?
I drive a lot from Calgary to Edmonton because I'm originally from Calgary. So I've gotten used to calling just my friend or my partner.
Oh, right.
I'm a big yapper, and it helps that this is my job right now because it serves me well. But yeah, and I just need to be with someone because on those roads, the wind turbines really freak me out. I don't know what it is. They're very eerie. They're huge.
They are.
And everywhere.
I actually agree with that. Like if I need to have a conversation with somebody, I do actually like doing it while I'm driving.
Yep.
And it's just something that I'm allowed to, my mind's allowed to wander a little bit while still focusing on them. And I really like that combination. Yeah. So I can see that.
Road trips are a really good opportunity for introspection, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But still valuable insights from all. The importance of community involvement in proactive healthcare solutions cannot be overstated. It's clear that with the right support and resources, rural healthcare can meet and exceed the standards expected in urban centers. Now, this takes us towards the end of the episode, and here at RDRF, we always finish with a fun question relevant to the podcast theme to get to know our guests more. Dr. Rolfson, if you could only bring 3 items to a rural clinic on a deserted area or place, what would that be, or what would they be, and why? And remember, no basic necessities like food or water.
Okay, that is a totally trick question because if it's deserted, then who am I taking care of?
Yourself.
Okay, well, I know how to take care of myself.
Okay.
No, so let's say that it's more remote. There's some people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my training is in geriatric medicine, and my tool is the telephone. But who knows? Maybe there wouldn't be telephone or cell towers. I'm not quite sure. But I would have to have some way to talk to people. That's the first tool I need, is some mechanism to have conversation. I would probably need to have, if I didn't have Wi-Fi or internet or anything like that, then I would have to have a pen and paper. Mm-hmm. And a lot of my work and the instruments that I administer and the way that I understand people is just by taking notes and administering tests and those sorts of things. Oh my. Okay, I'm really sorry. I'm a really popular person today. Everyone keeps calling me. But my third thing would be, what would it be? I'd probably some way to measure vital signs. And particularly in the elderly, I want to keep track of their weight. So I keep track of their weight, and that helps me with the effects of medications. And it's often one of the first clues into frailty, sarcopenia, and the declines that I'm looking for.
Yeah. I love that. Great choices, Dr. Rolfson. It's always really fun to hear these creative answers. I know this is always my favorite part of the podcast. For myself, I would probably say my running shoes. I'm signed up for a half marathon in 2 weeks. Haven't ran a single time this year. I was blaming the forest fires and the heat, but I just can't do that anymore. And
where are you doing it?
In Edmonton.
Okay.
In Edmonton. I cram for school. I cram for half marathons. So
it works.
Yeah. It's in character. And then probably just like a book, maybe a yoga mat, get some exercise out there. It is really beautiful here. It is crazy to see how much sky there is.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Dr. Abraham, I would love to hear kind of what you have to say.
So I'm probably going to have to say my stethoscope, if no one's actually said that already, at the very least, to listen in on things, not just your heart or heart sounds or lung sounds, but there's lots of things you can use the stethoscope for. I probably want a mirror, to be honest, to show to other people, to show to myself if there's something changing on my face or on parts of the body. Check breathing. I can use it to reflect sunlight off something, right? If I want to start, smart. Right? Like, so
start a fire.
Yeah. So a mirror has, I think, a lot of different uses. And even in clinical medicine, if someone's looking at me, but I need them to see something about themselves, I would want them, like, I can hold it up to them and say, is this what you're talking about? Right? If I'm getting sick, can I look in the mirror and see sort of that? And just like a simple pocket mirror. So I think that would be something that I would want. And then obviously the stethoscope, if it hasn't been mentioned before, and it's not just for clinical medicine. I think it serves a lot of purposes. Yeah.
I just realized this was a rural clinic, not just a deserted island. I was like, wow, I'm filled with, surrounded with intellectuals around me. Why are they bringing a stethoscope?
and a mirror. It's like MacGyver.
For me, I echo the pen and paper. because, and if we're only allowed one or the other, then if you bring the pen, I'll bring the paper.
You got a deal.
But, you know, sometimes you just need to sketch out your ideas or, you know, make those ideas real by putting it on paper. And I think that might be important if it's a deserted island or a rural clinic on a deserted island. I for sure would bring reading material. But so to choose something, I would probably bring the textbook of medical physiology, so I could be helpful to anybody else who might be there. And I would probably bring also Earl Grey tea to sustain myself and to build community with anybody I might encounter there. And tea has antioxidant properties. There are other things that we can use it for. So those would be my choices.
I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
So with that, we are wrapping up this insightful episode. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show. And it's been enlightening to learn about the Grand Prairie campus and the critical work being done in rural healthcare. So thank you, Dr. Rolfson.
It's been absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me and for your interest in this wonderful topic.
So to our listeners, we hope you enjoyed this episode and found it as informative as we did. Whether you're a med student, a pre-med, or just curious about the field, healthcare is all about making a difference.
Absolutely, Dr. Abraham. And for all aspiring doctors or just healthcare enthusiasts out there, keep pushing boundaries, keep learning, and never stop asking questions. We're all on this journey together, and every step brings us closer to making a real impact. Don't forget to join us next week for another exciting episode of Real Doctors, Real Friends.
And don't forget to let us know what you would bring to a deserted island on our social media channels or on our forums, depending on what we have up on the time by the time this episode comes out. Until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and keep all of those supplies ready for your deserted island.
Thank you, everyone. Catch you all next time, friends and curious minds. Take care.